Hello everyone, hope you're doing alright. Today I want to quickly talk about fixing terrible specs. In the past couple of videos, we talked about specs that are really struggling, especially in endgame PvE and endgame PvP, so ranked and NIM rating, etc. But we didn't really talk about ways that we could be fixing these specs. So I wanted to come in and present a couple of very simple ideas that would boost these specs up into a playable state without really breaking them. For example, Operatives and Scoundrels, they're already getting this fix, hopefully in 7.1.1, in AoE DR on evasion. Especially these two specs, they just don't really have the survivability that other melee DPS have, and so giving them AoE DR on evasion is a great way to boost them up, especially in endgame rating, without breaking them in PvP. And kind of in the same vein, if Mercenary and Commando kind of got the same treatment on Chafe Flare, that would really bring the specs more in line with what you could actually play in NIM rating. This would not break PvP because you don't really need AoE DR in PvP, but it makes it a much more viable spec in endgame PvE. Just slap it on a Chafe Flare. It's already a very useful defensive cooldown, but it's kind of not that great in PvE. Give us this, and then we should be ready to rock and roll, and we'll be able to play our Mercenaries and Commandos again in NIM rating. Now, fixing Marksman and Sharpshooter specifically, the damage is the issue. Right? It doesn't do any damage, but they don't want to over-tune it so it's too big in PvP. But what we can do is just slap a text on Agitating Energies, the PvE utility, which increases the damage of Corrosive Dart and Vital Shot. If we just got extra damage on Corrosive Dart and Vital Shot, it just fixes the spec. Suddenly it's playable again. It's the single target burst damage spec that you know and love that you can actually bring because it'll actually do damage again. So that's the first way to fix Marksman and Sharpshooter, especially in PvE. In PvP, give back roll heal. Like 10% roll heal is a great way to make sure that snipers can actually like play the game again. Because right now, if you play sniper, you just kind of lose because you have no way to recover. So those would be two little ways to fix the specs, especially in the end game. Looking at Guardian and Juggernaut. For the DPS specs, so Vengeance and Rage, if we could have Grit Teeth back as a utility for the DPS specs, suddenly the specs become playable again. Because right now, they just died too quickly. The only way to survive last expansion was to have Grit Teeth coming back so you could get a little bit of extra healing going on. If we were able to have Grit Teeth back for especially Venge and Rage, it makes the specs playable again in endgame PvP. Additionally, I think that Rage could use a little bit more benefit from the Shield Absorb that it gets whenever it does its leap. You can take the Shield Absorb as a talent right now. If that talent was a little bit better, suddenly the spec becomes a little bit more survivable without completely breaking it, right? So buff up that little bit of Absorb Shield and give back Grit Teeth because without it, the specs just kind of die. Now this is where we run into a little bit of issues because Hatred and Serenity are really going to struggle in endgame PvP no matter what you do. Dot specs as a whole do not do well in ranked. Some specs obviously can get away with it, but the way that they fixed Madness in PvP was by giving it that single target death field which increases leech, right? If they gave the same to Hatred and Serenity where you put this utility on a row that is separate from the PvE choice, but it just increases your leech, it makes it single target, suddenly the spec is a lot more survivable. Because what it needs is it needs the self-heals to keep it alive more than it currently does. Right now the self-heals on Hatred and Serenity are kind of pathetic, but if you were to have a little bit of extra self-healing through the utilities, I think the spec becomes a lot more playable than it currently is. So those are my simple solutions on how to make some of these specs more playable. I'm not an expert on this game, I just play it a lot, and these are my general ideas of how to fix these specs, especially in endgame PvE and endgame PvP without completely breaking them in one or the other. So let me know your thoughts, feed the algorithm, give me them comments down below, and let me know what you think. But hope you guys have a fantastic day. Enjoy yourselves, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye-bye.